And we're following major breaking news right now in the NFL. Saints head coach Sean Payton stepping down per multiple reports. He had been with the Saints since 2006, but just in the past couple days over the weekend, Sean Payton's status became a big question. Saints owner Gail Benson confirmed Monday that the team was in the dark on his plans. Apparently, Sean Payton had not really been answering a lot of phone calls, went dark on several people close to the organization. Well, now they know their coach since 2006 is officially leaving the team. Sean Payton, now 58 years old. He has won 152 games, good for 21st amongst coaches in NFL history. He led the Saints to their one and only championship back in 2009 as Drew Brees and company beat Peyton Manning's Colts in Super Bowl 44. He was also the 2006 Coach of the Year. Let's welcome in NFL insider Jonathan Jones to talk about this massive news. Sean Payton stepping away from the Saints. It is not clear if that is stepping away from a year, if it is a retirement, but either way, he is not going to be with the Saints anymore, JJ.
No, he's not. He's not going to be there for the 2022 season is probably the safest way of putting it. Sean Payton will not be an NFL head coach in the 2022 season. And there have been rumors and reports out there that he is wanted for some lucrative mega millions dollar deal with a TV network or two as a color analyst there. So all that is to be determined. But Sean Payton, I mean, this season with the various quarterbacks, right? I mean, four separate starting quarterbacks from Jameis Winston to Ian Book and Trevor Siemian and Taysom Hill in between. You have Sean Payton, who did perhaps one of his greatest coaching jobs ever, getting the Saints to be in a position to make the playoffs there in the final week of the season. Of course, things didn't work out their way there at the end, but a really impressive coaching job nonetheless by Sean Payton, who, he's been there for a decade and a half in New Orleans, and he will be synonymous there with the Drew Brees era, the Peyton Brees era, as we just showed there in the graphic, bringing a Super Bowl there to New Orleans shortly after Hurricane Katrina, and so a legend, no question about it. The second longest tenured head coach in the NFL, right behind Bill Belichick and right in front of Mike Tomlin. And so it's not a huge surprise based off of what we learned over the weekend. Gail Benson's comments, as you referenced just a moment ago, Amanda, when the owner doesn't really know what the head coach is doing, very clearly something is up and afoot. But Sean Payton will not be roaming the sidelines in 2021, perhaps in a broadcast booth somewhere, and maybe he finds himself back on the sidelines in a year, 2 or 3 down the road. But for now, it is Sean Payton done in New Orleans.
JJ, you say not a surprise right now, given what we saw over the course of the weekend. But I'm curious, prior to that, whether it's just you speculating or maybe rumblings around the NFL, did anybody really see this coming?
I think some folks, there were some rumblings. And, the funny thing, Amanda, about this is it's always rumor season. And you hear something, and if you report it and you're wrong, of course, you're crazy. And so you hear, Sean Payton might be done in New Orleans. It's like, man, after the coaching job that he just did with where the New Orleans Saints may be, when you look at how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may be searching for a new quarterback here in a couple of months. Wow, that's a little surprising. So, it is slightly surprising, but when you understand all of the factors involved with Sean Payton, with how trying of a year this was, let's not forget, of course, how they began the season, having to go out to Dallas, having to play in Jacksonville against the Green Bay Packers. It's been a trying year. 4 different quarterbacks. Ian Book having to go out there in that primetime game with the COVID-19 issues in that quarterback room. So, again, a heck of a job done by Sean Payton this season.
JJ, I mean, you talked a little bit about his legacy there in New Orleans. I mean, when it comes to Sean Payton, the coach, we don't know his next plans. We just don't know at this point. But his legacy, what he means to the Saints, to the game of football, how good he is as a coach, just kind of expand on that.
Yeah, one of the best play callers, offensive play callers in the NFL. And I think that he didn't really always get credit for that because he had a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback there in Drew Brees, but I think that he really showed his mettle this past season, as I've referenced earlier. And when you talk about, this was a franchise that, quite frankly, was a laughingstock, right? I mean, we all remember the Saints fans with bags over their heads in the Superdome, and Sean Payton comes in there, highly coveted coordinator and assistant coach, and he comes to New Orleans and, you know, quite literally turns the franchise around. He and Drew Brees, and he continued to find success in the year after Drew Brees. He found success when Drew Brees was injured these past couple of seasons, right? He goes 5-0 with Teddy Bridgewater, for example, and wins with Taysom Hill, and continued to reinvent himself as an offensive play caller and represented that city so well. Of course, in any sort of career recap, you have to discuss Bountygate and how he was suspended for a year and bounced back from that. There's even a major Hollywood picture that's going to be coming out about that. It's Kevin James as Sean Payton. Oh, I'm curious, the casting there. But Sean Payton no doubt has a legacy. And if Sean Payton does decide to return to coaching, Amanda, what we're likely going to see, if it's not in New Orleans and if it's elsewhere, there's going to have to be some sort of draft pick compensation that's sent to the New Orleans Saints by whatever team is hiring Sean Payton. I don't think it's any secret that the Dallas Cowboys, that Jerry Jones has coveted Sean Payton for some time. I know, of course, Mike McCarthy's seat was feeling a little bit warm after the end of the season. I'm not saying, of course, that Mike McCarthy's on his way out right now just because Sean Payton is retiring. But if you look at this a year from now, maybe Sean Payton's in the booth for a year. And maybe he likes it, gets a taste of it, but he misses football. He misses the locker room. He misses being a head coach. And the right job opens up, like perhaps one located in Dallas, that maybe that's something that happens. It's hard to tell the future. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball, but is that a possible scenario among the many scenarios that are out there in the future? Absolutely.
Oh, okay, JJ, I have two more questions. I'm going to skip one of them. I'm going to go to the other. So let's take a look at the Saints now. They are now one of many teams looking for a new head coach. Where do they start to turn?
Well, you have to figure out who your quarterback is going to be and what you want your team to be. What is going to be their identity? Is this going to be a defensive-led team, which we've sort of seen the last couple of years? Do you want to try to find a clone of Sean Payton? You know, you start looking out there. Do you want to bring in a Brian Flores, for example? You know, Sean Payton is making this move right now because he also doesn't want to put the Saints behind the eight ball, right? He doesn't want to retire 2 weeks from now when all the great coaches are snapped up. So we're still waiting on head coaches to be hired around the league. And once those dominoes fall, Amanda, they're going to fall very, very quickly. Now, once, let's say, Brian Daboll is signed as the New York Giants head coach, I think that we're going to see in quick succession a number of these sort of opportunities gobbled up. And so the Saints right now, how are they positioned? Well, they appear to be in salary cap hell. They're way over the cap like they always are around now, but Mickey Loomis always finds a way and can, with several restructures, get under the cap pretty comfortably and pretty easily. So it doesn't look that way. I tell you what, if as I mentioned earlier, if Tampa Bay doesn't have Tom Brady at quarterback in the 2022 season and beyond, if he decides to retire, look at the NFC South. The Panthers aren't competitive right now. The Atlanta Falcons were competitive in a number of games, and then half the games they got blown out. But this is a winnable division, no question about it. You just have to figure out who your quarterback is going to be and if it is going to be Jameis Winston. Right now, of course, it's difficult to foresee who exactly the New Orleans Saints would target there at the head coaching position, but because Sean Payton has informed them of his retirement at this point, before any other coaches have inked with another team, that puts them in a position to get into the sweepstakes for some of these top guys.
With all of these head coaching vacancies, we talk about the attractiveness of the jobs there. You talked about being in Chicago, and you're kind of a king there in Chicago when you take that job. I mean, the same could be said for New Orleans. I mean, they adore Sean Payton and that Saints team. Those fans are as faithful as anything you will see across the league. How attractive, given the questions at quarterback, about $71 million over the salary cap, how attractive is this job for someone?
I think it is attractive. Every time that this comes up, obviously there are pros and there are cons, right? And I think the biggest con here is like anytime you're following a legend. You're following a legend. You will always be compared to Sean Payton. And those comparisons will be there on day one. They will be there after the end of your 17th game. If you're fortunate enough to make it into the playoffs, they will be there. Unless you win a Super Bowl in year one, you're going to constantly be compared to Sean Payton, and very likely in a negative way or in a way that you don't like. So that's the biggest con. But this is a team, again, they have a fantastic defense. They have an offensive line that has depth. They have a number of options at quarterback. Obviously, Taysom Hill, whom Sean Payton unlocked Taysom Hill. Well, the next coach liked Taysom Hill as much as Sean Payton. I don't know who else likes Taysom Hill as much as Sean Payton. Do they want to stick with Jameis Winston through that ACL rehab? You have Alvin Kamara. Again, you're in a division that if Tom Brady retires, you can absolutely go out there and win this division in 2022. You have a strong and faithful crowd. You have a dome. New Orleans is a great place to be and live. So there are a number of great things about this opportunity. You know, off the top of my head, as we think about the 8 or 9 coaching vacancies around the league, I'd have to say that this shoots up very much to the top of the list. 1, maybe 2. I know some folks believe in Denver. They don't have a quarterback. I know that some folks like the Minnesota Vikings. I do. I'd put this right there with the Vikings as the top job open up in the NFL.
Jonathan Jones, we appreciate it. Of course, the big news breaking this afternoon that Sean Payton is stepping away from the Saints. We have much more on this coming up from our Jason Lockenfora right now, saying that Sean Payton is stepping aside. He is not retiring per se, but taking a break from coaching. We'll continue to follow this breaking news. We'll have much more on the other side of the break.